Great design doesn't end on the page. It begins there. But what does it take to bring a creative vision to life in a way that exceeds expectations and delivers measurable results? Today's guest is a global event marketing strategist who's helped brands like Bose and Lego do just that, from immersive exhibits to customer-centered campaigns and even launching cargo into space. Marisa Nebosky is here to share how strategic creativity is not only possible, it's powerful. So stay tuned for an amazing conversation following right after this intro.
Welcome to the Events-ified Podcast, where we demystify the world of in-person, virtual, and hybrid events, AV production, and AI technology by sharing practical tips, tricks, and strategies to help your event succeed. This podcast is brought to you by Trefan Events, a woman-owned boutique event production agency that caters to event professionals, small business owners, and entrepreneurs. We specialize in AV and AI education, integration, automation, and implementation, all based on our Fit for Events framework, which focuses on futuristic AV production, innovative AI technology, thriving audiences, and empowering behind-the-scenes teams. And I'm your host, Anka Patan Trefan, with over 2 decades of hands-on experience in event production, event management, and now AI technologies and cybersecurity.
Welcome back, friends, to another episode of Events-ified Podcast, the podcast that takes you behind the scenes of event production, creative leadership, technology, wellness, and strategy. I'm your host, Anka Patan, and I'm so excited to have with me someone whose design work I've admired and whose strategic mind inspires me. Joining me today is Marisa Nebosky. Marisa is a seasoned marketing and event strategist with nearly 2 decades of experience developing award-winning brand stories across events, campaigns, and digital. She's led standout programs for major brands like Bose and the Lego Group, built immersive activations that generate leads and drive business impact, and is known for her thoughtful creative process. A CMP with a deep commitment to mentoring early career professionals and a volunteer for dog rescue missions, Marisa somehow also found time to help and send cargo into space. And I can't wait to ask her more about that. And with that, let's welcome our guest to the show. Marisa, welcome to the show.
Hi, good morning. I'm so excited to do this and getting to chat today and finally diving into some design work.
I'm super excited to do that just the same way as you do. I think we've had a few false starts where we're trying to match schedules and you were gone on some different events and activations and I was traveling. The life of the event professional, right? It's not easy to sync and have those schedules match. Now, before we dive into all the things, strategy and creativity, I really want to start with something fun. And I've heard that you got elected to your high school student council just so you could plan the prom party, which is honestly one of the best origin stories that I've heard. Do you remember what team you picked for that prom party? And do you think that that was maybe the moment that events bug really hit you?
I think a little bit. Yeah, it was so funny. So that we had like 1 or 2 openings on student council and everyone was like, oh, you should be our financial officer. And this is like junior high. And I'm like, I don't even know what that means. And I think about managing multi-million-dollar budgets now. And maybe that's really how it started. But yeah, for some reason, everyone thought I would be a really good person to manage that. I had been a tri-varsity athlete in high school, captain of my team. So I think maybe that natural leadership piece, but yeah, I got elected and we had the 4 of us on student council. We went and did our site visits. It was like my first time doing a site visit. We got to order swag, so that was really cool. We got to test out the food. So it was kind of like the first time diving into what it meant to plan an event. But we also were like, how do we make it look cool in here? So we didn't have like a sort of theme, so to speak, but we had like really cool uplighting, and we made sure the tablecloths matched like the nice silverware. And we had really cool glasses that had like a gold trim that people could take home with them as like their keepsake. But yeah, it was such an interesting experience.
I love it. Was this the era of Pinterest boards, or it wasn't there yet?
I think it was close to it. Yeah. I mean, I think that might have been closer to college. I know instant messenger was big in like middle school, like high
Mm-hmm.
school. So right
Yeah.
around there. Yeah. I think Pinterest might have been a little too, like I was part of the Napster phase in college. So yeah, Pinterest I think was a little bit later. We had
Because
Facebook.
I'm already thinking you were like putting together those vision boards with what this prom was going to be and
Oh
all these
yeah.
colors, matching things. But I guess that was more of prior to Pinterest becoming this big
Yeah.
deal. And I know people that have done that on paper and like just,
Oh yeah.
physically putting like different things together, fabrics, and just to see if it works together, which I think was the first, right, ideation, vision boarding of like what an event design would look like.
Yeah, it's funny because growing up, we had like the cork boards, right? And I used to get my paints out and I would paint like the trim of them, like different colors. And then I would either do like a solid background on the cork piece. And like you said, I'd pull things from magazines I thought were really cool designs. And I would change up the boards in my room based on how I was feeling. So I think maybe that was like an early ode to like Pinterest or what was coming
Right.
for later on in my life.
I love it. I love it. Okay, before we get into something really serious, I want to know a little bit more about this sending cargo into space
Yeah.
story. I mean, I only alluded to it twice. Give us a bit of the background.
Yeah, so it's actually really interesting. When I was it 2021, Lego is a long time partner of NASA. We had an opportunity to work with the team over at NASA in sending the first official Lego minifigures up into space. So I learned a lot about what that process is, how you get approved to put something in their flight kit, what is
Mm,
involved with like how long it needs to sit in like quarantine before you can send stuff up, things that can and cannot go up. And it
great.
was such a really cool experience. And so that's why I always have it as one of my fun facts, because I'm like, yeah, I helped send some cargo into space, little minifigures, but they went up, they went around the moon, they came back.
I love it. So are they like now kept in this like NASA like Hall of Fame where everybody gets to
Yeah.
see the minifigure that made it to space?
Yeah, they went up with Snoopy actually. So the Artemis one back in, it was November 2022, it finally went up. Snoopy was the zero gravity dictator to make sure everything was working. But yeah, I think they're still at NASA, to be honest with you, or somewhere in Billund right now. But it's so cool to think like you kind of had this part in like pop culture. And then on the flip side of it, we all got to put our names on a flash drive. And this was something NASA did
Oh,
with anyone that wanted to. You could go and upload your name and they'd give you a flight ticket. So my name actually went around the moon too as part of the list of passengers. Yeah, so it was a really cool experience.
I love it. That's not anybody can have those bragging rights. So I think that's fantastic. I love that story. Now, I remember us connecting over a LinkedIn post, and I know we're both super active on LinkedIn, and I love your posts, especially as they relate to event design and production. And it was a story that you shared about an event design that looked great in renderings, but
Yeah.
then the final build was even more stunning. And I had this entire conversation with a prior guest where we talked about the difference between just layouts and drawings and then renderings. Can you tell us about that experience and why it still stands out to you as one of those moments that was worth talking about?
Yeah, for sure. I think that was an exhibit I did at Bose. It was a 30 by 50 footprint, I believe. It was for an industry trade show for musicians, manufacturers in the musical industry. And I just remember us finishing it and taking a step back and was like, wow. And I think ambience is kind of the whole piece here, because you can prep and look through your graphics and figure out what the experience is going to be. But when you actually get in the space and everything's tucked away where it's supposed to be and the lighting is set and the signs are up, it just creates this mood. And it was just like this wow factor. Everything that you've been working on and hoping it's going to come together and it looks good on paper, but when you actually lift it off of the page and see it in real life and you're like, this worked. For us, it was just one of those
It's like,
moments.
this
Yeah,
worked.
it really is, especially when you add in some of the technical components. We had in that exhibit in particular, I remember one of the design challenges is we had 4 products to show that were kind of grouped together. And then we had one other kind of product vertical that was complementary to those 4 other products, but also kind of standalone. So part of the struggle was like, how do we show 5 products that are connected, but not necessarily connected, right? So we were able to create these pockets, as we call them, outside the frame of the exhibit, and then use the middle piece as like this stage where we'd have musicians that could come in and play. And we did this fun Plinko type game where it was called Drop the Mic. So this is like understanding your audience, where if you work in pro audio, you do not drop the mic.
Right.
But it was the whole idea that you could come in, we ask you a few questions to kind of gauge your understanding about our brand, and then you could go and drop the mic and win a prize. It was something small like a t-shirt or a lanyard, and occasionally you could hit the jackpot and win like a speaker or something.
That's
And
fantastic.
then, and then the back end, what we did was, because our other vertical was rental, we kind of created like a behind the stage where you'd have like your amp racks and your speakers. So it felt a little bit more like, here's the front of house.
And this is the behind the scene.
Yeah. And so it was kind of, like I said, I'm someone that when I work on the graphics, and people know this, I'll go into the office and take a big wall and I'll print everything out, I'll tile it, and I'll put it up, and I'll stand back and I'm like, okay, this looks pretty good. I think this is going to work. But when you then get there and actually kind of start assembling, it was just one of those spaces that we were like, we think this looks good, but let's see what happens when we get there.
I like that. I really like, because that's a kind of moment that really shows how the intention behind a design can carry through into an actual memorable outcome and experience. But to understand the process, or for our audience to understand the process, I would love to explore with you a little bit the steps that led to that. So when you're starting a new project, whether say it's for an exhibit, a campaign, a brand activation, what does your creative process look like from brief to execution?
Yeah, so it can be a couple different things depending on what the project is, right? Sometimes we already understand what the business goals or objectives going in, and kind of the direction we need to take creatively. This is a brand campaign, or this needs to be a brand activation. So you could have a general idea of what the experience needs to be, but a lot of times, especially with my exhibit design, I love to whiteboard. And I will sit there, like at Bose, I had my team, my creative tech specialists, and we would just sit and whiteboard, bubble mapping how we would build this exhibit, right? And in doing so, we'd put product A here and product B. What does the flow look like? We need to set this up in a way so people
What is the
understand.
story that we tell through the flow?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Because I think some of the best exhibit designs are ones that you know how to go through it without someone telling you. So you actually understand the story that they're trying to get you to take away from it. So it's a lot of that mind mapping, that bubble mapping. And then on the flip side of it, I'm a big believer in the creative brief. I had a teacher in high school that said writing is the most important thing you can do in your life, because if you can't write, you can't communicate. So
I would agree with that.
yeah, right. And you kind of, if you can't clearly depict what it
Yeah.
is you're trying to design verbally, you're going to have a hard time trying to figure it out visually. So,
Or even to explain or relate the vision that you have in your head. And many creatives, I feel like they do struggle with that. Like they have this amazing vision, right? But when it comes to them saying it out loud or making it sound like what it is in their head, it's one of the hardest processes if, as you mentioned, writing is not necessarily part of your skill set.
yeah, and I think to your point, you have to understand that when you're going to get buy-in from certain people, especially with budget, you can't always just show like a bubble map up on the screen and you're like,
Okay,
this is
let
gonna
me
be
stop you
great.
for a second. Where does this bubble map come from? Because obviously I'm familiar with mind mapping, but this is a new term to me. I need to know where is it coming from?
I don't know. I think it's just something I started doing over the years and started collaborating with my exhibit houses or my creative agencies with, where it's like, the idea with the exhibit is like, okay, so product A needs to be our main focus. So it needs to take up like 30% of the exhibit. So we draw a circle that's a little bit bigger. Product B is a little bit smaller on our scale. Maybe it's selling really well. It doesn't need as much exposure, let's say. So maybe it's like 10%. So that bubble is going to be a little bit smaller. So it's kind of like visually showing the importance of the products that you're laying, or maybe which pieces in the exhibit need to have more like support for that customer experience piece. But it basically helps me out when I then take that and to figure out, okay, what do the structures look like? So I need this much room in order to properly highlight this product. So it's just kind of like the bare bones, I guess, before you get to the next piece, like your 2D renders. And then when you actually start building in some of the 3D aspects of the exhibit.
So it's like you have the bubble map before you have the mind map.
Yeah.
This like cranial detailing of, like you said, the product placement specifically. And
Yeah.
then you build that mind map, which includes the overall, like from a macro point of view as you're looking in. I like that. Okay, I learned something new. Thank you, Marissa.
You're welcome. Yeah.
So going back to the creative process. So now you've gone through this process, you got your product placed based on their importance, based on the elements of ROI or whatever the objective is for that particular exhibit. What happens next?
So I start to kind of dive a little bit more into how you demo or how you display these products, right? Because I think some of the worst things you can do is just put a product on a table and assume people are going to come and see it.
Or like be interested in it. They don't even know that this is supposed to be the piece of resistance, and they just walk past it and they look like this little thing over here. Like, no. This is where we're supposed to draw the focus and the attention.
Exactly. Yeah. And so I think if you're going to be on the trade show floor, there's so much noise. You have to figure out how to stand out, and you can't always do product demos in your space, right? I've had some exhibits where we've built in a small room to run demos, which it does work. It gives like that air of mystique where what's going on behind the scenes. But I've had some where you can only do so much because you only have so much room. And so it's figuring out creatively, like, how do I build the graphics around this? Like, and it's not just saying like, this is how it's displayed in the store, so let's translate it to that in the booth. One of the things when I was at Bose that we did was push a full, complete product solution. And so it was thinking about, how can I display these products differently? So working with our tech team, we created like wire diagrams of like, you use product A with B and C, and this could all be used in a restaurant setting, for example. So we took this idea of doing whitewash graphics that show where the products would be used, and then actually cut holes in the wall or mounted the speakers so you could see what this looked like, how it works with this, and where it could be used. So it became a little bit more immersive and eye-catching when you come in. And then we had monitors on there that, depending on what your questions were, you could easily cycle through and look at the tech specs, look at the case studies. So I think it's figuring out how can you display something that can be stationary, but still grab someone's eye, because you have to remember people only have like maybe an 8-second attention span once they walk in there, and you want them to stay for at least a few minutes. 5 minutes, 10 minutes would be great.
Yeah. So some of those exhibitions that you worked on, they would, from what I can understand, because this is consumer electronics, right? Bose also going into professional audio. Is that CES, NAM, Infocom? What are some of those trade shows that you mostly would go to exhibit? Because it's obviously not IMAX. You wouldn't see Bose there.
Yeah, I think it's all of those, right? So it's those larger industry shows like CES, Infocom, NAM, ISC, which is one of the larger integrative systems Europe shows, was in Amsterdam. It's now in Barcelona. But also we think about strategically, what other kind of programs could you have in our wheelhouse? So a lot of road shows, right? We're showing up to the customer, where part of my role there on a global level was working with the teams to figure out how to creatively demo the products, make it more immersive, and then working with my immediate team to figure out how do we package that up into something they can take into an office or on the road, right? So creating like consistent storytelling across all of our verticals, all of our channels. But yeah, trying to kind of keep that cohesion, like, this is how this product gets demoed. These are the framework of it.
Of it. Well, from everything that you said, it sounds like at first glance, creativity is easy, but it's not. Creativity is hard work. And people often see the polished result, but not the challenges or maybe the late night pivots and changes in design and plan. How do you personally deal with creative blocks
Yeah.
or the tougher parts of the process?
Yeah, I think it's never a straight line, right? I think people see the finished product or the booth, the experience, the event, the content on social media, and it looks easy, but they don't realize how much goes into it, the struggles, the pain points. I also think naturally as creatives, we're a little perfectionist in us.
Just a little?
Yeah, just at least a little bit. And I think part of it has to do with the fact that we're so trained to pick up small things like being able to see if a frame is slightly off, that when the process gets hard, being able to take a step back and realizing you can only control what's exactly in front of you. And even if you think this could be better, it still is really good. People are going to like it. So for me, with that kind of creative block, a lot of times it's like having to unplug and shut off, change up the environments. I know you're a really big advocate for working out and fitness. I think going out with nature, going for a walk, going for a run, something that completely just remove it from your brain for a while and then going back and resetting. I found that to be kind of the best way to manage the stress and the struggles that can come with an imperfect process.
I love that. I definitely can relate to that, especially as I'm going through my own creative process of writing this book. And I started at it, I promise you not, like shortly after COVID, like 2021, 2022. And then I had to take a break. I had to remove myself from the process. And that break was a long break by all accounts, because some people, they can just start a book and then finish it in a few months' time and it's out. Like, great, good for you. I knew this was going to be a hard project. It was so hard that at one point I said, you know what? I need to put it on the shelf and not touch it until I feel like I'm ready to go back to it and look at it from a different point of view or from a different perspective, even from a different psychological healing place, right? And I think it's the same true could be with the creative process, only you don't always have the luxury to put something on the shelf for a whole year or two, right? Because I'm sure there's deadlines, I'm sure there's expectations, and you might have to deliver something in a few months' time, and you're like, I'm not feeling it. Like right now, the strategy to take a break from it is still not working. Anything else that you felt like it has worked, like maybe doing something relatable, but it's like a smaller piece of it, so it's not this challenge that you're trying to solve and overcome, but it's still in relation to the main process or the main project? Anything that you've noticed that actually, looking back, has really helped me?
I think as I've gotten older and worked longer in this industry, it's understanding the way you work. And so what I mean by that is everyone that knows me and works with me knows, don't book a meeting with me between 4 and 5 or like after 4 o'clock. There's just something about like, I don't have capacity to be on and to talk. And I just know that if you need to really talk to me, like you're going to have to wait a few hours. I have to sign off and recharge. And I don't know what it is. It's just something about 4 o'clock. I think it might have been, I used to stop and walk
the witching hour for you.
It's like the time that you just don't. And then I think on the flip side of that, like I was never a morning person. I was always a night owl. But when I stepped into a global role about 10 years ago, I didn't have that luxury anymore. When you're working with teams in Europe, you're on early. And when you're working with teams in APAC, you're on late. And so I found I'd have to get up early, have those 6 or 7 o'clock meetings, and then I would try to set it so like 8 to 10 o'clock was like my deep work time, where it was like, you can't bug me, and I would just block out the calendar, because I think we get so heavy with the meetings, and creatives need time to think, that if you don't let us think, you're not gonna be able to get anything done. So I think the biggest learning is understanding the best way that you work.
Absolutely. I feel like as we get older, maybe, I don't know if that's necessarily that has to do with getting older or not, but I'm the same way. I used to be a night owl, and I used to do actually my best work at night, and I would always joke about it. Like, no, I don't need to wake up in the morning. I can sleep in, and then I'm still on late into the evening. And my brain has shifted in the last few years, I would say, where now I have to be up at 5 a.m., if sometimes even earlier. I do my best work when it's quiet, when there's no distractions, and I know I can get like 3, 4, 5 hours of relevant, productive work done. And then I can start my day with the meetings that I need to do. And then even like throughout that, sprinkle in time of focus or breathe and reset. That's what I call those times for me. Like if I have one of those heavy days with like meeting after meeting after meeting, I literally block time in between those meetings and just for like having that time to even like process what did we just talk, because otherwise you could go from like 8 a.m. till whatever 4 or 5 p.m. and you've done meeting after meeting, and at the end of the day you're like, I feel like there's a lot of things that happen and like my brain right now is fried. I don't even know what are my action points, what I need to follow up with. And a lot of I feel like productivity and a lack of efficiency happens when you don't allow yourself time to process and then to follow up on those action points, on those key takeaways. And people just let things slip through the cracks because they don't give themselves that kind of time, right? And you're like, yeah, so remember we talked about that during last meeting and nobody did anything. Like what happened? Well, that's one of the outcomes if you don't allow yourself some time to be able to reflect, see what the next steps could be and what needs to be done after. And I think that, like you said, that's part of understanding how you work, what works best for you, crafting or carving the type of time throughout your day that will help you optimize that output. And sometimes, like as you mentioned, you have to work early in the morning and then late at night. Even in the middle of the day, you might carve some time out where like, this is my me time. I'm going to the gym. I'm going to walk my dog. I'm going to do shopping. I'm going to do all the things. Everybody's working during this regular normal hours. I'm not, because my schedule is completely different than everybody else's.
Yeah, exactly. And I've said this before. I think the companies or the work structures where they expect you to be at your desk 9 to 5 just don't work for creatives, because you need time to think. If they see you at your desk thinking, they're like, what are you doing? You're like, I really am working. Like, I promise you, like I'm thinking.
That's right. Well, Marissa, you built some campaigns for quite some iconic brands. How do you ensure that creativity doesn't just look good, but also meets business goals like engagement, lead gen, whatever the KPIs are for that specific brand?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think a lot of times you run into those instances, whether it's a marketing campaign or some sort of out of home activation, and it's like, yeah, this looks really cool. But I think in our industry, we're so accountable for dollars, right? Like we're always like, please give us a decent amount of money so we can make this work under a reasonable time frame and legitimately with how much it's going to actually cost us, that I always encourage my team, like, you need to be accountable for every penny when you build out your event programs and your marketing campaigns. So for me, it's saying, okay, what's the projected return on this? So how do I create something that's going to align with the business goals and then convert into dollar signs, either by selling product or building pipeline, opening up, expanding our customer base. So a lot of times it is kind of like you said, looking at those goals and objectives and the business goal, and then designing some sort of experience that can help to achieve those. But at the same time, taking into account what is the brand voice, what is the brand identity, who is the typical audience or consumer for the company, and using all of that data to figure out, okay, maybe what's their problem that they're trying to solve, and how can I creatively show them what the solution to that is? What's going to catch their eye?
I love that. There's something really powerful about connecting that strategic thread throughout the whole experience. And because you've developed event programs that blend storytelling and technology and interactivity, what are some must-haves that marketers and planners, you feel like they often overlook when building events that are meant to truly resonate with their audience?
Yeah, I go back to like, this is where we have to put on our data caps and be the strategists. And a lot of times it's making sure there's a clear, defined KPIs or goals and objectives. And I know a lot of people joke about like, we're going to that show because we're going to that show. Okay, if that's what your stakeholders are telling you, fair. But you need to go then figure out a business reason as to why you should be going there. Because if you're going to go anyway, you need to still figure out what you're going to measure when you go there. So it's making sure that you're not having goals and objectives that aren't set and agreed upon and clear. I think the other big thing that we talk about is mapping of the customer journey, right? So what does that look like across various touch points? So gone are the days where it's a one and done event. Everything should be integrated. Your event that you're going to or your event program should be integrated across your other channels, your brand marketing campaign, whatever story you're telling there. Maybe it's you bringing the story to life at an event. So it's making sure that everything is integrative and you're pulling the thread. And then my last thing, which is my biggest kind of pet peeve and where we often see the program fall off, is the follow through, right? So I think automation is great. You should use it. Once someone leaves your event, send them a thank you with how do they get in touch with their account rep, or what are next steps, or book a meeting. But then make sure that those leads get tracked in CRM. Make sure that they're getting assigned to your sales team. Check back with your CRM manager like once a month to get an update on what those leads for each of the shows are and the projected return. So when you go to build your programs, okay, this show actually did really good. We thought it was going to be like a 1x, but it was like a 10x return. If you don't follow through and track those metrics, you can't assume someone else is going to do it. And so as the event professional, the one that kind of owns the program and the dollars, you need to show the value that you're bringing to the table with your program.
Absolutely. I can tell you that I've been to so many trade shows over the course of my life, and only very few brands do follow up really well. And it's a fine line between doing that really well and being present and staying present in the prospect's mind versus turning it into being super annoying too as well.
Exactly.
And then you end up in the unsubscribing category like really, really fast, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's such a fine line. And another thing that I've noticed, and I don't know if there is maybe some tips or advice that you can give to this, I feel like a lot of brands, they do put a lot of effort to create those marketing campaigns that really speak to the type of event they put on. They try to integrate it throughout their branding and other events. But in the process of doing that, they come across as just like cold and boring. And you're like, where is the fun in this? Like, how can you attract me and bring me in, whatever it is that the story, this narrative is, but make it fun? Like, I feel like a lot of brands forget like the play part. The reason why we want to engage with the brand is because we want it to be fun, we want it to be light, we want it to be entertaining, right? And many brands, they follow the rule book and they put all this content and then invites this and that and reg pages, and it just falls like flat.
Yeah, it's funny. It's like that old saying from Coco Chanel, and look in the mirror before you leave, take off one accessory. It's kind of the same idea with the event. Look at everything you have going on and focus down. Dr. Bose used to say, put yourself in the place of the customer. Like, we're not just creating products. Like, he wanted the employees to purchase the products and use the products. So when I go to design an event, I'm like, would I find this interesting? Would I go and would I do this? And if the answer is no, why am I going to expect someone else to go and sign up and be like, yeah, I want to be on your mailing list, right? So for me, like you said, it's like figuring out a fun way to show the products. We did this industry event at Lego where we were kind of doing a spinoff from the minifigs going up into space and this content series I had worked on with my team. And we brought it to life for the teachers. Like, the kids had such a fun experience watching the episodes every week and then doing the brick lessons afterwards, that we wanted to create something for the teachers. So we created an escape room where you could go and basically solve 5 challenges that highlighted the full continuum of products. But the catch here was, in order to get in, you had to answer a few profile questions, like nothing major, just do you know about the brand? Are you interested in our products? Are you looking for follow-up? How soon might you be looking to purchase? And so what ended up happening is we showed these teachers, these educators, how they could use our full solution in the classroom. They came out immediately wanting like follow-up calls with our sales team, because I want to bring that experience into my classroom, right? So it was a really good way for us to connect with the customer. We solved the problem. We showed them how you can use our products in a really fun way and what they're meant for. And at the same time, we were able to do some lead nurturing, right? Create some new leads, help push them through the funnel. So I think it's like you said, like, if you're, as the designer, if this isn't appealing to you, what are you doing? Like, you should want to go to your own event.
I love that story so much. I can tell that you bring a lot of heart into your work.
I do. I get really passionate about it because, like I said, I think when I was a kid, I grew up playing sports. We went to a lot of sporting events, and I just loved the atmosphere and the community. And I don't know, it was just always a really great experience that if you're going to come to something I'm designing, I want you to have a good time. I want it to be worth the time and the energy that you put in to come.
Absolutely. Now let's take here a different road into the life of Marisa before she started in events. You started as a graphic designer before you fell into events.
Yeah.
And before somehow, somewhere along the way, you helped this cargo go into space and all the steps that you took on this journey that taught you all the things that you now know, but also it taught you about adapting and evolving as a creative professional. What was that personal journey like, and what was the purpose inspiring this journey?
Yeah, it's interesting. I feel like I've come a long way since I've graduated college, and even in college when I was first learning about design and marketing. I think the biggest thing I've learned is you kind of have to have a tough skin, right? Especially if you're a creative, because not everyone is going to maybe be as receptive to what you're trying to design and the vision that you have. So that can be hard. So you have to definitely have that adaptability, right? That changes happen. There's always going to be stakeholders that disagree. But I think trying to be calm and cool and open, right? Being willing to listen to other perspectives. My creative collab sessions, like I always love to get a bunch of people in the room because I believe that someone had an idea and then someone builds off of that idea and then someone builds off of that one, and you get to this like a really, really amazing final product. So it's that openness and wanting to work with other people. And then I think it's, as I've gotten older, being a little bit more self-aware of my strengths and not necessarily weaknesses. I don't like that term. I just think it's areas you can learn a little bit more about yourself, and just understanding the best way you work, being a continuous learner, working with others or people you admire to kind of understand their story and how they've gotten to where they are today. So yeah, I think that's kind of the bulk of it is just really being open, adaptable, and aware of your own abilities and potential.
Absolutely. I love how the story actually showcases how there's so many unexpected doors that creativity can open. And I couldn't agree more with you that when you bring a group of creatives into a room and you put the task is to solve some kind of a challenge and allow them free will to do it their way versus making it, this has to happen this way, whatever.
Yeah.
I remember we did that for a team building event, and talking about Legos, actually, it was a team building event where it was about 12 of us, and we were trying to brainstorm our next event. And we've done enough events by then where we're like, we didn't want to be repetitive. We don't want to come with the same things, the same themes, the same colors, the same programming. So how about we all get into this room together and we work on Lego sets, literally.
Yeah.
Like the brief was, here's a bunch of Legos. What can you create with this? And let everybody just go wild with the whole idea is that once you create this piece of whatever that might be, now try to tie it into our event. Like how would you like this event to be, like giving you free will to build it whatever the way you want it, right? And you use the materials being these Legos that are like the bricks, and you just build it to be what you have in your mind. It was the most creative like team building experience I've ever done, because I mean, to see everybody's take on it and their version of that could be, and then try to replicate that with bricks, even if you had any talent or not at building Lego sets, right? That was
Doesn't
fantastic.
matter. Yeah.
I loved it because the event that followed after that was really, truly one of a kind. And I think the secret sauce there was the fact that we allowed everyone to just be creative in their own way. And we didn't put guardrails that, no, we can't do this. No, this is too silly. Or no, this doesn't follow whatever the prior guidelines or template that we used to have. And that goes to say creatives can really brings so much to the ideation and to the brainstorming and the execution of the event, as long as they're allowed to be what they are. And sometimes that can be hard, because I remember having a conversation with another creative on the podcast, and she was talking about how her title now is like cat herderer.
Oh
And
yeah, cat herder.
because
Yep.
because
Yeah.
like she needs to herd this group of creatives and
Yeah.
still provide this direction and focus, and that sometimes it does feel like herding a group of cats, because
Yeah.
everybody wants to
It
go in
can
all
be.
directions,
Yeah.
and then you're like, hey, yeah, but now we got to get it all back together here.
Yeah.
This
Yeah,
direction.
it can be an experience when you get a bunch of really creative people in a room, like you said, and it's kind of like, bring it back in. Let's focus for a minute.
Absolutely.
But
Well, from cats to dogs, let's
yeah,
talk a little bit about your dog rescue dog advocacy, because you're deeply involved with that and you
yeah.
volunteer your time to help dogs find their homes. How does that mission fuel your work or inspire you personally?
Yeah, so I actually adopted a rescue dog of my own
Mm,
almost 16 years ago. She came from a high kill shelter in Louisiana, and it was one of the most rewarding experiences of my life. I didn't realize at the time how bad the shelter crisis was, and
mm,
since her passing, I've gotten a little bit more hands-on with some local rescue agencies out here in Boston, and we work to bring up dogs from the South that have either been displaced or abused, and we give them care. We help to find them a loving home. So I think sometimes when you're kind of in this corporate world, you just kind of like need to recharge and like refill your
mhm.
glass. And this is just such a good thing that when you see these transports of like 30 dogs coming up and you're just like, I've helped to kind of save this animal, right? Give a voice to something that not necessarily can speak. It's just really rewarding. But before I got involved with this, I helped with Make-A-Wish as well. So I feel like it's that good yin and yang where you're kind of using your superpower, this creativity, this event piece, to give back to the community in ways that help to kind of recharge and bring some good energy out into the world.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for being maybe the catalyst that also brought my own dog to our family, because our dog, Abby, she's a bulldog mix with a lab, a very interesting mix, but it's like the friendliest,
Yeah.
most emotional, attached dog you're ever going to find. And I remember my kids were begging me for a dog for a very long time. And in my mind, I'm already thinking, like, I already have this busy schedule. I already have 2 kids. The last thing I need is a third kid, because technically,
Mm-hmm.
like, the moment you bring a pet into your house, it becomes a child. So
Yeah.
I was like, no, 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 there's no way. So one fateful Sunday afternoon, we were all having like Italian for lunch. And my son is like, I just want to look at the pictures of the dogs at our shelter. There's Idaho Humane Society here locally. And I'm like, okay, you can only look at the pictures, but that's all we do.
Mm-hmm.
Said every parent ever that was
Yeah.
about to just get a dog several hours later.
Yep. Yep.
So they look through all these pictures, and then here's the picture of Abby. And I kid you not, like, there is a thing about you imprinting on an
Yep.
animal. And I saw them imprinting as I'm eating my pasta, and I'm like, what is going on? They're like, we're only gonna go and see it. We're
Mm-hmm.
not gonna do anything. Sure enough, we're on our way to the shelter. And the moment we took this dog out of her enclosure and we walked her, we knew we're not living without
Meant to
her.
be. Yeah. Aw.
And it changed her life forever. But it's funny, because talking about how different dogs are being transported from different states, and she was transported from, I forgot, it was Nebraska or a different state, and I'm not sure the conditions in which some of those dogs are actually transported across the state lines. But when we took her from the shelter, she was terrified. I
Yeah.
mean, terrified of driving. Like, she almost like ruined the back of our car, like shredded it to pieces. That's how terrified she was. And it took her many, many months of us to actually do that in a very intentional, like, caring manner, for her to be comfortable in a car to go places.
Yep.
Because at first she was just like shiver in fear. And it's like, I think it was that traumatic journey that she took. And I don't know exactly all the details how that happened, but I could tell that that was definitely something that affected her so deeply. And again, she's a very emotional dog. So if by all means, if there's like a level that dogs track on the emotional scale, like Abby is
She's
definitely
pretty
up
emotional.
here. Yeah, exactly. So
Yeah.
she was affected by that transit so much. And several years now, I think like 4 years we've had her. Like she is the happiest, like
Oh, that's
most
good.
lovable dog ever. She doesn't have a problem traveling or going anywhere anymore. Actually, she
Yeah.
loves it when we do. But you can tell how much trauma is involved.
Yeah.
Sometimes you're not even aware
Yeah.
with rescue animals. And I really, really want to take this time to thank you for actually putting that kind of time into volunteering your time and making that be a different experience for some of the animals that you get to touch on a personal level.
Yeah, in the rescue, our team down south will pull them from the shelter to give them time to like decompress and get used to being in a home so we can best prepare them for success and find adopters that are a really good match for them. And then when they come up here, they again come back into our home. So after they've cleared the quarantine process, the state mandate one, they go into a foster home. So once they're pulled from a shelter, that's it. And so we tell our potential adopters, we have the 3-3-3 rule, which is 3 days to kind of decompress, like 3 weeks to kind of start to pick up your routine, and a good 3 months before they start to feel at home. So we have to be patient because we don't know the backstory with many of these dogs. We've had some come in that have been abandoned in parking lots, some found on the side of the road. I mean, there's some really horrible, horrible stories.
Yeah.
I just don't understand sometimes. But yeah, we do our best to kind of, like you said, with the dog where you're pulling out of the shelter, I totally could see that as like part of the decompressing. And again, they've been through so much change in their life. They don't really know what's going on until they feel safe and home.
Yeah, it was the best decision we made. I'm sure glad that the kids followed through with their intention for us to live with the dog, and definitely changed my mind.
Yeah.
And yeah, and she's now part of our family. She's been part of our family, and I couldn't see life any other way. Now, as we are coming to a wrap up here, Marissa, for anyone that's listening today, and when we're thinking about the creative that might be one of our listeners, and maybe they're just starting out, or maybe it's an event marketer that's looking to find their voice, what's one piece of advice that you would offer to help them take that next step or keep creating?
Yeah, I think if you're just getting started, understanding that your first attempt probably isn't going to be great, and you have to be okay with that, right? It's continually to practice and to get better, but you kind of just have to start. And one of the other things I really love is not looking at things as failures, but as learning, right? So it's constructive learning. So positivity on tests or creative that didn't work, taking away what did work, what didn't work, and applying it to the next step. But you can't be afraid to try. You have to put yourself out there. There's this saying in sports, and I have no idea where I heard this, but it's stuck with me for a really long time. Practice like you've never won, play like you've never lost. So it's the same idea where you just need to kind of get out there and start trying. And eventually through all of this experimenting, you will find your voice, you will start to mold your voice. And really, you have to understand it's okay to be imperfect, right? Especially with the design process, because it's never going to be a straight line. It's never going to be easy. So being comfortable and being willing to be uncomfortable and imperfect is probably the best advice I could give someone.
I love that, and couldn't agree more on looking at failures as learning opportunities. It's funny because I didn't quite grasp what that really truly is until I started on my bodybuilding journey, and I started being super intentional with my training. And one thing that you do, especially in weightlifting and strength training, you train for failure every single day. Like literally, quite literally, right? So you're going there knowing that the goal is to fail at whatever rep, whatever set that you're pushing hard to, because that is the recipe for you building muscle, for you building stamina, strength, all the good stuff, right? So when your mindset changes from I'm here intentionally to fail, and that is because I'm here to grow. That is what, when you take into your real life, when you take into your professional endeavors and your creative process, then failure is not so much such a hard, sore subject anymore. Because in the
Yeah.
beginning, like I remember, like I've had many instances where I beat myself up over something that I perceived that I failed at, and I would be really hard on myself. And maybe the rest of the world moved on, and here I am still working through it in my head and still like ruminating on what could have been better. I would have freed so much brain space and
Yeah.
capacity if I was able to learn earlier how to let go and how to learn
Mhm.
from that versus just stay in it forever.
Yeah.
And I really love that you basically were saying the same thing. I was thinking one more question before we actually
Yeah,
wrap up,
sure.
because we talked about marketing, we talked about the space, we talked about digital high performance, all the things that have been really embedded in the way we do events, especially since 2020, not just since 2020, even before that, but that was
Yeah.
when it was more prevalent. Where do you see event marketing going next?
Yeah, it's a great question. And this isn't anything new. I think it's just coming back to the surface. It's the idea of those micro events where I talked about some of the places where event marketers might take a misstep, and it's understanding your audience, right? So I think with budgets being cut, budgets not accounting for inflation, those really micro events that can be immersive, community felt, really for your niche audience, right? Going to where they are. I think brands are probably going to start pivoting back to that. The other piece, I think AI, right? So not to take over the human connection piece of events, but how do I enhance the event with that? How do I speed up some of the planning or the processes with it? In terms of, like I said this earlier about the integration, right? So no more one and done, figuring out how does this event pull into a larger campaign, right? So you can show that it's giving business value and it's being integrated. And then I think, again, just like understanding your customer. If you're doing a webinar, I read a stat the other day that it was something like 40% registration was higher if your webinar was under 30 minutes versus an hour. So continuous learning, understanding your data, understanding your audience. And then going back to kind of those micro events, I think community building is going to be impactful, right? So I think people want that connection, that face-to-face experience. They want to meet up with others that have similar interests and passions. And if they're fans of the brand, that's the best way to build brand advocacy, was when a customer tells your story organically to somebody else. So I think those micro events and that community piece, and then really trying to layer in AI strategically, are probably going to be where we're going to be pivoting to over the next year or a couple years.
I love that. And I would be amiss not to mention, talking about micro events and community, that both Marissa and I, we met in this community of event professionals and marketers called Club Ichi. And there's so much goodness in that community, in a community that is intentional about how they share resources, about information sharing, about all those lessons that we get to learn. And so I wanted to give it a shout out to Club Ichi, apply Club Ichi.
Liz and Nicole, yeah, we'll give them a shout out, because it's a great safe space where we talk about those creative collaborations, creating a safe space where everybody can have a voice and an idea. And I think it's the same thing that Liz and Nicole have been doing over there, and David,
And now David, yep,
and now David too, and what I love
and
is you
Janice, especially on the Event Minds Matter with the mental health.
And they're all free of sales pitches, which I think is great, because a lot of times with these communities, like, you want to get involved, but I don't want another cold email. I don't want you to pitch something. Like, I'm happy to network with you, but let's just talk about the industry, some of the challenges, things that are working. So I think those barriers are really great too when you're building community in person or digitally. So I've done a lot of those kind of events, those fireside chats, things like that. So yeah, I definitely think we're going to see more of those smaller scale, like going to where your customers are, the audience.
Totally. Marissa, this was such a wonderful conversation. Thank you
I had
so
a lot of
much. It
fun.
was thoughtful, inspiring. For anyone that's listening who'd like to connect with you, where can they find you online or follow your work?
Yeah, I think LinkedIn's probably the easiest. Like you said, I do a lot of posts on there, and I'm just feeling like chatting about something. I'll post something about events or a really cool case study I saw, or some sort of inspiration. But yeah, I have a link up there in my LinkedIn bio if you want to book a meeting to just network or see how we could work together in a future project.
Absolutely. And with that, thank you again. That's a wrap for today's episode of Events-ified Podcast. If you enjoyed the episode, share it with someone that would want to learn more about Marisa and her marketing strategies and the type of work that she does. Also, someone that might be navigating their own creative journey. And don't forget to subscribe, leave us a review, and until next time, keep creating, stay curious, and remember, the process is just as powerful as the product. See you next time.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Events Demystified podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with other professionals like yourself. If you're interested in learning more about TreeFan events, including our future AI education talks and workshops, or to see how we can support your next event, book a free 20-minute consultation through the link in the episode notes. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and follow us on YouTube, Spotify, and social media for updates on future episodes, industry insights, AI news and tips, and more. And if you have any topics you'd like us to cover, feel free to reach out.